Okay, so starting off today's show, I wanted to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. This was the biggest game of the weekend. It probably was the best game of the weekend, and I do think it lived up to the hype as the Pittsburgh Steelers are now sitting in the AFC North with a record of 7-0, and they beat the Ravens by a final score of 28-24. And I do think that it's really starting to become a real problem in Baltimore. Lamar Jackson went 13 of 28, had a couple picks, and it is known that he has had trouble throwing the ball for a while. And I think on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers, it really cost the Baltimore Ravens the game because what he's doing right now is just not enough. The Ravens are not going to beat good teams with him throwing the ball the way he did against the Steelers. He lost 2 fumbles in the red zone, which against a defense as good as the Steelers, you just cannot do. And here's the crazy thing. The Ravens dominated the game. They outgained the Steelers 457 to 221, had the ball for 35 and a half minutes, had 25 first downs, went 8 of 15 on third down. When you compare that, Pittsburgh went 3 of 9 on third down, and still, with all of those things going for them, Baltimore being at home, they could not beat the Pittsburgh Steelers because really Lamar Jackson had 4 turnovers. And it's not specifically turnovers that have been a problem for him because they haven't. I guess if you look at his career, this was the worst game in terms of turnovers that he's ever had. But I do think at some point the Ravens need to win on the outside enough. And late in games when the Ravens are down a couple points, they were driving the ball all the way down the field in this game specifically, and the drive started with 7 and change to go, and it went all the way down to the 2-minute warning. They didn't throw the ball one time, which to start off the drive was fine because ultimately they got to the red zone. But it's 4th and 3, and they called a running play. Why? Because they have no faith at all that their wide receivers have the ability to get open. And I tweeted this right before the play. The Ravens actually called the timeout right before the 4th and 3 play. I tweeted this out. I said, this is the most important play of Lamar Jackson's career because we spoke about it on the show last week. The Ravens lost their biggest game of the season so far to Kansas City. We know the struggle that Lamar Jackson has had against good teams throughout his career in the postseason. And this game against the Steelers, when you had an undefeated divisional rival coming into your house and you're the defending MVP of the league, and unfortunately for Lamar Jackson, he wasn't able to get the job done. If I'm a Baltimore Raven fan, that's a big, big problem going forward. And the crazy thing is, going back to their receivers, they've had so many chances to upgrade to that position and haven't. So I'm assuming that the Ravens feel okay about their wide receivers, but still, they then get the ball back with no timeouts and 60 yards to go, down 4, and Lamar Jackson is throwing underneath routes, and time ultimately runs out. I know the Ravens had one shot in the end zone late in the game, but I really never thought they were going to convert there. And yeah, when you look at the Ravens right now, I think they need such a specific way and such a specific game plan to win and be at their best to beat elite teams. And if that doesn't go their way, I don't think they're going to be able to beat anyone good. And I think Week 8 against the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game was a prime example of that. Lamar Jackson could not beat them throwing the ball and had way too many mistakes. Hollywood Brown comes out after the game and tweets out, what's the point of having soldiers when you, in parentheses, never use them? And then in all caps, never with like a billion exclamation points. He didn't talk to the media after the game, and if you look at his numbers, he had 1 catch for a 3-yard touchdown. There are some unhappy people in Baltimore, and if you listen to this podcast before the season started, I actually kind of called this was going to happen. I said that the Baltimore Ravens were going to have to make a deal with the devil and sign Antonio Brown because their offense wasn't going to be good enough and their offense wouldn't be able to repeat what they were able to do last season. And so far, that prediction for me is coming to full fruition. The turnovers by Lamar Jackson yesterday were just really unacceptable. I'm not shocked that the Ravens are where they are as a team because I picked the Pittsburgh Steelers to win the division, and I do think they are very good. But Baltimore is limited in the ways they can play offensively. Now, Baltimore did run for 265 yards, and I do think if you watch the game, you would agree that they outplayed the Pittsburgh Steelers for the most part, but they lost because of the pick six to start the game, fumbles, and really other mistakes by Lamar Jackson. Now, with that being said, I understand this is a regular season game, and on the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast, all we do is look at the big picture in January. And we know the Ravens lost this game because of crappy turnovers. But big picture, the Ravens have to be able to throw the football. And I hate to say it, but signing Dez Bryant to your practice squad isn't going to do anything about that. That's not solving anything. They need to be able to win multiple ways. And right now, they could really only win one way, and that is just running the ball down your throat. And to be fair, it has worked a lot over the last couple years. But in the same stretch, when they've played good teams and good defenses, they have not won. And that's a problem. Now, the good news is, if you are a Raven fan, is all hope is not lost. You're still going to have one more big opportunity to go on the road to the Pittsburgh Steelers, to Heinz Field on Thanksgiving night. And I'll say this, right now, I'm confident as ever in my pick in the Pittsburgh Steelers to win the AFC North. And I'm as confident as ever that if you put Baltimore in a big spot, especially if you put them in a deficit, I am not confident at all that they could come back and win a game like that. And the good news is, if you're a Raven fan, is that they're actually going to get one more shot at the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road. And if you could win that game, then you're going to shut people like me up. But right now, Lamar Jackson couldn't beat Pat Mahomes at home, couldn't beat the Pittsburgh Steelers at home, the best defense in the AFC. And as good of a player as he is, even though he's the defending MVP, he is just on a different level right now as some of the other quarterbacks in the league. And ultimately, as good of a player as he is, this is the difference maker between a Lamar and Mahomes and a Lamar and a Russell Wilson. Now, the Steelers are 7-0. They've had a pretty easy schedule so far, and the Ravens are 5-2, and they have a somewhat easy schedule remaining. It's a little bit tougher than the Steelers, but the Ravens have to win in Pittsburgh, or let's just call it like it is. The divisional race is over. They're 2 games behind, and they're going to have to get help in addition to that. One stat that stood out to me in this game, right? The Ravens became the first team since 1950 to outrush an opponent by 200-plus yards and outpass them and still lose. Ben Roethlisberger threw for 182, Lamar Jackson threw for 208, and the Steelers only had 48 yards rushing, and they still lost. That's what turnovers really could do to you. And my last point here is this. The Steelers are 7-0, and I totally understand that right now when you look at them as a team, you're going to see that they have the best record in the NFL. And if you look at not only do they already have some really nice wins over a team like the Tennessee Titans, over a team like the Baltimore Ravens, and over a team like the Cleveland Browns, who currently are in position to make the playoffs in the AFC, their schedule for the remainder of the season isn't that bad. I know they go to Dallas next week, take on Ben DiNucci. That's going to be a huge mismatch going up against the Steelers' defense. But talking about the Steelers, right, none of this is suggesting that the Steelers aren't any good. But I got to be honest with you, right now when I watch the Pittsburgh Steelers play, I don't think they're 7-0 good. They're like 5-2 good, which in the big picture is really good. But keep in mind, in the playoffs, there's going to be some team that dares Ben Roethlisberger to beat them deep, and right now, I'm not so confident he could do that because so far this season, he hasn't really shown me the ability to do so. Now, keep in mind, I do think we have to remember that Ben Roethlisberger is a quarterback that is coming off a significant arm injury. I think as the season goes on, he's going to get better and better, more used to playing football again. Keep in mind, he hasn't played a full season in about a year, and I do believe that as time goes on, he's going to develop more and more chemistry with his weapons. But if you're Mike Tomlin, if you're Randy Fichtner, I think you have to look at this Pittsburgh Steelers team right now and say this. Right now, with our defense and the way our record looks, we have a 99.99999% chance of making the playoffs. Odds are the Steelers will be in the playoffs. So by the time from now until the time the season comes to an end, if I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, I want to see this offense with Ben Roethlisberger and with some of their wide receivers really develop some deep shots, really see if they could add some explosiveness into this offense, and really see if Ben Roethlisberger has the ability to throw the ball down the field at this point in his career. Because I've said it a lot about the Saints, I've said it about the Bucs. You're not going to be able to beat anyone if you can't throw the ball downfield. No matter how good the Steelers' defense is, that's going to be something they're going to, have to get fixed. Pittsburgh's hard games remaining include Baltimore at home, which they could lose, home against the Colts, which they should win, at Cleveland, which I think they should win, Bengals 2 times who are competitive, but they're the Bengals, Dallas, Washington, Jacksonville, and then at Buffalo, that's a tough game, but I do think they are better than Buffalo. So the Steelers, I think there's a good chance they could win like 14 to 15 games, just because if you consider the fact that their schedule is pretty easy, they really don't play anyone. And that's a break that ultimately they caught, and that's just, the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. And when you look at this AFC North, I'm super impressed with the way Mike Tomlin and his Pittsburgh Steelers were able to go on the road to Baltimore and get the victory. Because let's be honest once again here, folks, the Pittsburgh Steelers were outplayed. I think we could all agree, if we watched the game, the Baltimore Ravens looked like the better team. And still, the Pittsburgh Steelers went on the road and found a way to win. And to me, that is a sign of a great, great football team. When you don't even have your best day going up against some big-time opponent on the road, and still you're able to find a way to win, that's why I feel so good about these Pittsburgh Steelers right now. I picked them to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl before the season started. You could go back and listen to the tape, had them losing to Seattle, and I'm not going against that right now. When you look at Pittsburgh, I think their defense is the best shot to possibly shut down a Kansas City Chief offense, and unfortunately, those two teams do not play during the regular season this year, but I just have a funny feeling we may see them in the AFC Championship game, and if that game is at Heinz Field as opposed to Arrowhead, I do believe that gives the Steelers a little bit of an edge, because going to Arrowhead and beating Patrick Mahomes there is tough. But right now, after the way the Ravens played, after the way the Titans played, I don't know if we could legitimately say that anyone not named Pittsburgh or Kansas City could make their way to the AFC Championship game.